Welcome to the Madison Miller podcast. It is April 16th, 2025. First show in several weeks. Last time I popped on, I did baseball predictions. Today I'm going to do an NFL mock draft, talk some hockey and baseball, talk about the Masters. But I want to start today's show with the NBA. We have the playing stuff going on right now. We had two games last night, the 7-8 playing games. We had in the East, the Magic over the Hawks, 120-95. So the Magic blow out the Hawks to get the 7th seed. They will be facing the Boston Celtics in the first round. Atlanta will play Friday against the winner of tonight's Heat Bulls game for the 8th seed. And then the Warriors beat the Grizzlies 121-116, which was a really good game. Golden State let Memphis hang around in that game, and Memphis missed a lot of critical free throws and turned the ball over at brutal spots. So Golden State will be playing the Rockets in round 1, which I think Golden State is happy about. And then the Grizzlies will be playing Friday night for the 8th seed against the winner of the Mavericks-Kings game. So interesting, for sure. I did think that the two home teams would prevail last night. I'm surprised Hawks Magic was a blowout. And I thought if any of the two games were going to be blowouts, it was going to be the Grizzlies Warriors. But the Grizzlies kept that a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. The Magic were 5.5-point home favorites. I think I would have taken Atlanta to cover with Trae Young because you could argue. Best guy on the court was, and going into the game was probably Paolo Banchero, and then Trae Young would be second. But the issue for Atlanta, Trae Young didn't shoot particularly great. Zachary Ricochet did not shoot well. Neither did Dyson Daniels. Off the bench, Gorgas Niang provided some good stuff. Jalen Johnson did not play. He was hurt for a while. So that stinks for Atlanta. And then on the other side, Paolo did not shoot good. The best guy in the court was probably Cole Anthony off the bench. He had 4 3-pointers. Wendell Carter Jr. had a good game. Franz Wagner, 0 for 3. Yeah, Orlando was looks like a 6.5. Yeah, it closed at 6.5. I would have taken Atlanta to cover. And then Grizzlies, Warriors, Golden State closed as a 6.5-point favorite. I would have laid the points, but Memphis covered, surprisingly. And then the over hit. Jimmy Butler was the best guy on the court last night. He was fantastic. Or you could argue if it was Steph. Actually, no, I lied. It was Steph, of course. And then Jimmy Butler is right there with Steph. Although Butler shot it better than Steph, but Steph had all the threes, of course. And then off the bench, Gary Payton and Quentin Post did really good for Golden State. And on the flip side, Memphis, Desmond Bane kept him in that game with his 5 3-pointers. Jaren Jackson Jr. shot it well from 3. Zach Edey double-double. John Morant shot it good. And off the bench for Memphis, Santi Aldama was good for them as well. So now we look ahead to tonight. Heat Bulls, two teams that are kind of dysfunctional. The Bulls are very dysfunctional. Heat, I think, are more dysfunctional than the fan thinks. They trade Jimmy Butler to get Andrew Wiggins back in the deal. The Bulls are only a 1.5-point favorite at home against the Heat. I think a lot of people will bet the Heat based on the reputation. It's Erik Spoelstra. Best guy on the court's probably going to be Bam Adebayo. And then maybe Tyler Herro. I do think Miami's going to win the game. Even though the Bulls are home. I think this should be a pick 'em. I think Miami wins. Bam's going to have a good game. The Bulls, actually, ESPN Analytics is giving them a 58.4% chance to win, which is crazy. So it's going to be interesting. And I want to see how Josh Giddey plays tonight. And his performance in these two, or in potentially 2 games, I think is going to be interesting because obviously that's the big piece they got for Alex Caruso. But I do think Miami wins, and they'll play against Atlanta Friday night, which should be a really interesting game on Friday night. Those 2 teams have had a lot of history in that division. So I'm excited for that if it's Heat against Atlanta. And then Mavs Kings. Best guy on the court, if he's healthy, it should be Anthony Davis. Kyrie's out for the year, obviously. Anthony Davis is good to go. No Malik Monk. No Jake LaRavia tonight. So the best guy on the court should be Anthony Davis, but I just think without Kyrie, the better team is Sacramento. Sacramento's a 5.5-point favorite. And I think Dallas it doesn't care. They've had the year from hell. They trade Luka. Kyrie gets hurt. But yeah, they probably have the bleakest future in the NBA. Like, they got a terrible package back for Luka, like I've said on the podcast. And that's no offense to Anthony Davis, who I think they should just trade in the summer again. See if they can get anything for Davis. Hey, maybe you can get something. They might get something better back for Anthony Davis than they did for Luka, for crying out loud. So, I just think Dallas should blow it up. Fire Jason Kidd, fire Nico Harrison, and just start over. But yeah, I think that's a blowout. If there's any blowouts tonight, I think Sacramento's gonna blow out the Mavs, and I think they're gonna cover 5.5. And then Friday night, in theory, would be Heat Atlanta and Kings at Memphis. And I'm going to say Miami, with their experience, gets the 8th seed, and they'll play Cleveland. And it'll be a LeBron Bowl. Or I should say an old LeBron Bowl. And then the Grizzlies survive to play another day, beat the Kings, and then they'll play Oklahoma City. So, first round series predictions. Let's just say in theory it is Cleveland-Miami. I think Cleveland sweeps Miami if that's it. And then if it's Cleveland-Atlanta, I think they sweep Atlanta. And what if it's the Bulls? I think they sweep I think Cleveland sweeps whoever they play in the first round. And if you ask me who has the best chance to make that series interesting, it's probably Miami. With Bam and Tyler Herro and Wiggins and Spoelstra, you could argue has a coaching advantage over Kenny Atkinson in that series too. And best guy in that series is obviously Donovan Mitchell, though. And Donovan Mitchell's best guy in a series against Atlanta and Trae Young. And he's best guy in a series against the Bulls. And then I would say Atkinson has a coaching advantage over Quinn Snyder and over Billy Donovan. So, it's crazy that Billy Donovan's still the coach of the Bulls. I would not have guessed that. I wouldn't have thought that. But here we are. So it's interesting for sure. And then in the West, OKC, let's say if it's Memphis, I think that's a sweep. And I just think Oklahoma City is just better than Memphis. And Tomas Zalo, the intern coach, I think coached a decentish game yesterday to keep the minute, but Mark Daigneault has a coaching advantage over him. And then, I mean, you could argue Jason Kidd. I mean, you could have last year argued Jason Kidd over Mark Daigneault, but I'd say Daigneault over Jason Kidd this year. And then, obviously, Daigneault would have the advantage over Doug Christie, too. So, do I think they sweep all those teams? OKC, yes. I just think OKC and Cleveland are so much better than your possible 8 seeds. And just like I said for the East, who has the best chance to make the series interesting against Oklahoma City, I would think not Dallas for sure. You can talk me into Sacramento being like the most interesting. They could make it like a 5-game or even a 6-game series. I mean, you could even say Memphis too, but they've kind of fallen apart down the stretch of the season. Listen, I do think OKC sweeps whoever they play. Yes, I'm going to say Sacramento has the best chance to win a game, and I think Miami has the best chance to win a game against Cleveland. So I think it's going to have to be Miami, Cleveland, and then Memphis at Memphis OKC. Only because I think Memphis beats Sacramento in Memphis. That's all. And then, although I do think Sacramento has a better chance to make that series interesting as OKC. I know, weird. And best guy in the series, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander against any of those 3 possibilities. All right. So the 2-7 in the East is Boston-Orlando. Best guy in the series, Jason Tatum. Coaching advantage has to be Joe Mazzulla. Joe Mazzulla is a good coach. I mean, I was wrong about him last year, and he stuck it to me and won the title. So he gets the edge over Jamal Mosley, who, if they get swept by Boston, Orlando, I think Jamal Mosley might get fired. Coach of the year to fired would not surprise me. And then we're going to do subplots in a second. So I'm going to do subplots for the 1/8. Yeah, so this actually has a line. If I had to guess the line for the series, I'm going to say Boston's like a minus 600 favorite. And I'm going to go to FanDuel for the lines here. Yeah, so Boston is minus 7,000. Whoa. And Orlando's 20-1. I think Boston sweeps Orlando. Series correct score. Boston 4-0 is actually the favorite outcome, plus 126. I actually think that's what's going to happen. We'll stay in the East. Knicks Pistons is your 3-6. Best guy in the series. Some may say Cade Cunningham. I am going to say Jalen Brunson because he's more of a proven playoff player than Cade Cunningham. Although I do like Cade Cunningham. I think he's the second best player in the series, arguably, unless if you want to say Karl Anthony Towns. So you could argue second or third best player for Cade Cunningham. He's really good, but to me it's Jalen Brunson still. Coaching advantage, it has to be Tom Thibodeau over J.B. Bickerstaff. J.B. Bickerstaff was just fired from Cleveland last year, and the Knicks beat J.B. Bickerstaff in the playoffs in the past, granted with Cleveland and not Detroit. Guess the line of the series. I'm going to say the Knicks are like minus 650. They're only minus 430. Detroit's plus 340. I do see people trying to pick Detroit as like an upset pick because of Cade Cunningham. And he does have a chance to be the breakout player of the playoffs to some degree, even in a losing effort. My pick for the series is going to be Knicks in 5. I just think the lack of experience from Detroit's going to hurt them. To me, there's a team in the West that's similar to them. I'm not going to spoil it. So I'm going to say Knicks in 5. That is plus 240. The favorite outcome in the series is Knicks in 5 at plus 240. And then it's Knicks in 7 at plus 390, Knicks in 6 at plus 470, and the Knicks sweep is also plus 470. That's weird. And Detroit in 6 and 7 is plus 980. Detroit sweep is 25-1. Detroit in 5 is 15-1. So Knicks in 5 is the favorite outcome of the series. And then Bucks Pacers. Best player in the series is Giannis. Coaching advantage, I got to say Rick Carlisle over Doc at this point because Rick Carlisle made the Eastern Finals last year. And he's a great freaking coach. I just think that he had a couple of rough years in Indiana to start his Pacers tenure. And had a couple rough Dallas years after he was before he was fired there. But Rick Carlisle's a good NBA basketball coach, and I think he's underappreciated as well. So I'm giving him the advantage over Doc Rivers. And then Damian Lillard probably isn't coming back for the series. I'm going to say Indiana is but if Dame was there, Indiana's probably still favored. I'm going to say Indiana is minus 400. And they're only minus 215. So people are betting on Milwaukee, who's plus 180. And I would make Indiana favorite over Milwaukee even with Dame. I just think Indiana's a good team. I think Indiana wins the series in 5 or 6. Maybe Dame does come back for like one game. But I'm going to say Indy in 6 because I think Giannis steals 2 by himself. This is out of respect for Giannis. So I'm going to say Indiana in 6. That is plus 440. The favorite outcome is Indiana in 5 at plus 390. Oh, no, Indiana in 7's the favorite outcome. Why? That's so weird. Indy in 7's the favorite outcome at plus 350. Then it's Pacers in 5 at plus 390. Then it's Pacers in 6 at plus 440. Pacers sweeps plus 820. Oh, Bucks in 7's actually plus 680. So that's interesting. Bucks in 6 is plus 540. And then Bucks sweep is 18-1. And then Bucks in 5 is plus 1260. Yeah, so the third favorite outcome is actually fourth favorite outcome is Bucks in 6 at plus 540. So that's really interesting. That's banking on Dame coming back soon. All right, the West. The 2-7 is Rockets Warriors. Best guy in the series is Stephen Curry. Better coach, Steve Kerr. Although Steve Kerr and Ime Udoka faced off against each other in the finals when Ime was with Boston. And then obviously that whole situation happened. And then Missoula got the job that fall. So it's going to be interesting for sure. And then Jimmy Butler on a new team is interesting. And Jimmy Butler, obviously played against the Celtics when Ime was the coach too. If I'm not mistaken. Was that the conference finals the year Boston played Golden State? I think it was. I think that was the conference finals that year. I could be wrong. I believe that was the conference finals that year. Yeah, it was, because I remember the Heat beat Philly, and then they played Boston. Yes. So Jimmy Butler's played against Ime in the playoffs in the past when he was on Miami, and Ime coached Boston. So that's another weird subplot there. To me, will the lack of experience for the Rockets hurt them? We talked about Detroit in the East. I think that's going to hurt Detroit. I think it's going to hurt Houston here. My pick's Golden State in 6. I think Golden State's favored too. I'm going to say Golden State is minus 150. Minus 188. And then Houston's plus 158. I'm going to say Golden State 6. Is that the favorite outcome too? Yes, plus 250. And then the next outcome on the board is Rockets in 6 and Golden State in 5, plus 520. And then the next one's Rockets in 7 at plus 610. Then Golden State in 7 at plus 630. And then Golden State sweeps plus 790. Houston in 5 is plus 980. Houston sweeps 22-1. And then you have Lakers, Minnesota is your 6-3, 3-6. Best guy in the series. Ooh, you could argue 3 for this. 3 different players for this. And I'm going to say it's Luka. Although, historically speaking, it's LeBron James. And there's an Anthony Edwards case too. But I'm going to say Luka. Then LeBron, then Anthony Edwards. And then the coaching advantage here, I'd say, will go to Chris Finch over J.J. Redick, because J.J. doesn't have experience. Although I think J.J.'s done a great job this year with the Lakers, considering the big trade they made in February for Luka and then remaking their team on the fly. So I think J.J.'s done a fantastic job. But I have to say Chris Finch because of the playoff experience from the past and making the Western Final last year. And then to me, the storyline of the series is Julius Randle and whether being on a new team will shed or help shed the playoff narrative he had with the Knicks. So it's going to be interesting for sure. And my pick of the series is Lakers in 6. I think Minnesota wins 2 games. I think this is a good series. I think Minnesota's a good team. I just think the Lakers are better. They'll win 2 games. And Lakers in 6 is plus 540. Favorite outcome is Lakers in 5 at plus 350. Then Lakers in 7 at plus 360. Then Lakers in 6 at plus 540. Minnesota in 6 plus 550. Minnesota in 7 plus 710. Lakers sweep plus 820. Minnesota in 5 plus 980. Minnesota sweeps 15-1. And then the line, I would have guessed, it's Lakers minus 196, Minnesota's plus 164. I would have guessed Lakers minus, I would have said like minus 1, I would have said minus 180 because Minnesota's good. This is the best 6 seed I've seen in a while, Minnesota. And then last but not least, Clippers, Nuggets. And then Denver is home court, by the way. Best guy in the series is Nikola Jokic, without a doubt. Coaching advantage. With Mike Malone fired, it has to be Ty Lue. Dave Adelman just started, and then as an intern. But hey, I'll say this. I think the lead assistant on the Clippers is a better coach than the intern guy on the Nuggets, that's for sure. That's Jeff Van Gundy, who I think is going to be a coach next year in the NBA. Like a head coach. I have an opinion about that one, but I'll talk about that later. So, to me, the storyline of the series, could James Harden shed the narrative just a little bit? Just a little. And can Kawhi make it through the series? I'm picking the Clippers. They're a good basketball team. And I think they were right to go out and win that game on Sunday. There's people saying, they should have tanked the fall to 7 to play Houston. Kawhi Leonard needs the rest that he can. So, they did the right thing. And sticking to Denver, who downgraded at head coach, in my opinion. And Denver just isn't as good as they used to be. And then the other storyline of the series is Russell Westbrook against the Clippers. It's fun. I'm picking Clippers in either 5 or 6. I just don't know how many games yet. I'm going to say 6 because I could totally see like a Jokic game where he has a triple-double, like 40, 20, 15. And I could see like a red-hot Jamal Murray game. I just think the Clippers are the better team. But I think they win in 6. And Clippers are actually favored, minus 118, and the Nuggets are even money. The Nuggets were open as a favorite, but everyone's betting the Clippers. And in the correct score, Clippers in 6 is plus 410. That's my pick. But the favorite outcome is Nuggets in 7 plus 390. Like, why isn't Denver favored in the series if the Clippers are favored, and Denver in 7 is the favorite outcome? And then Clippers in 6 is plus 410. That's the second favorite outcome. And then it's Nuggets in 5 at plus 540. Clippers in 7 plus 570. Clippers in 5 plus 590. Denver in 6 plus 760. And then Clippers sweep is plus 980. Denver sweeps plus 1260. So other storylines I didn't really hit. So Boston, Orlando. Orlando, I think, has been a very disappointing team in the East. From what people expected, people thought they were going to be in the top 6. I mean, could they make it interesting against Boston? I don't know. Maybe. And to me, the interesting subplot of that series is, could Orlando make it respectable? Because I think their coach is on the hot seat. Especially, I understand there were injuries this year, but like their offense is so stagnant. But if they get swept and they don't make the coaching change, they're like, we didn't have Paolo for most of the year. We could have been the 6th seed. We could have played the Knicks well. Yeah, maybe. But maybe the reality this whole time is that your team really wasn't as good as you thought. And maybe last year, no, it wasn't really fool's gold, but it was like premature. Your time's not now and it's in the future kind of thing. You know what I mean? And then Knicks Pistons, to me, the subplot is similar to Harden and Kawhi on the Clippers. Can the Knicks core 5 make it through healthy? And can they get any production out of their bench? If the Knicks get production out of their bench, they might actually sweep the Pistons. The reason why I think that only goes 5 is because the lack of experience for Detroit's going to hurt them. Although the only player that's had experience in the playoffs has been Tobias Harris, and he's not even a star. He's just a role player that could shoot threes every once in a while, and he stunk against the Knicks last year. So, yeah. But if they actually had a good bench, I would have picked them to sweep the Pistons. And if they had a good bench, I think that they'd be in the conversation with Boston and Cleveland. But if their bench shows up, then they're a different team. That's for sure. And to me, a subplot is if somehow Detroit does pull off an upset over the Knicks, is Tom Thibodeau's job in jeopardy? I think it is. And I think he has to potentially make the conference finals to save his job. Unless if you lose to Boston in 7 or something like that in the next round, assuming you get by the Pistons. And then Pacers Bucks, another coach whose job is on the line, in my opinion, is Doc Rivers, and that's in spite of Dame Lillard. It's blood clot. If they lose in 5 or get swept by Indiana and Dame doesn't come back, I think the Dame thing is going to play a determining factor in whether Doc Rivers comes back or not. Because if they fire Doc and say they don't have Dame, they'll tell you all you need to know. Like, yeah, like we weren't as good as we thought. And let's not forget, the Bucks got off to a horrible start this year, similar to Philadelphia, but they turned it around to the point where they got into the top 6 in the East. But yeah, to me, the subplot is could Milwaukee be competitive enough for Doc Rivers to keep his job, which I picked Pacers in 6, but I still think there's a chance Doc gets fired if that's the outcome, especially if Dame returns. If Dame doesn't return, and that's the outcome, then I think Doc probably saves his job. So that's, to me, the most fascinating subplot of that series. And then the West, I really talked about the subplots, like the upstart Rockets and whether the lack of experience is going to hurt them or not, which I think it will. Julius Randle, change of scenery guy, and then the 4-5 is whether Kawhi and Harden can get through healthy, and Harden whether he steps up or not. Okay. So that was a lot of playoff talk for sure. And it's going to be an interesting first round. Okay, now I'm going to do my NFL mock draft. It was my first one. I'm going to be doing several shows next week leading up to the draft. So the draft's 8 days away. This is my first mock. And then I may do a show over the weekend. Maybe Saturday I'll do my second mock. And then maybe I'll do that in the morning before all the NBA playoff stuff starts. So without further ado, here's my first mock draft. Number 1, Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. This feels like a lock at this point. Will Levis isn't the answer. And to me, Ward's the best quarterback in this class. 2 to Cleveland Browns, Travis Hunter, cornerback, wide receiver, Colorado. The Browns get the best guy in the draft here, in my opinion, in Travis Hunter. To me, Hunter's the best non-quarterback in a draft in terms of a prospect since Saquon Barkley, from an offensive standpoint. And it's going to be interesting. Hunter could play 2 positions, and if the Browns take him, well, I think they should put him at wide receiver. Although I wouldn't be opposed for them to put him at cornerback either, because they have needs at both positions. 3 to New York Football Giants. I have them taking Armand Membo, the offensive tackle out of Missouri. I would personally go Abdul Carter here if I was the Giants. But they really don't need an edge rusher. So that's why going with the tackle makes sense here. Or do you trade down and go down a little further enough to where a quarterback would be okay? You get more picks and a quarterback. But also, you have a chance to draft a potential generational edge rusher, and then you can trade Brian Burns or Kayvon Thibodeau if you take Abdul Carter. But Membo makes sense here because it's a need, and they need somebody to go with Andrew Thomas at the tackle spot. Number 4, the New England Patriots, Abdul Carter, edge, Penn State. This is a dream scenario for New England because Carter's probably the second best guy in the draft behind Travis Hunter. And you could argue he's going to be the best edge rusher in a draft since Aiden Hutchinson. So this would be wonderful if New England lets Carter follow them, although they need help on the offensive line too. So it wouldn't be the end of the world if the Giants took Carter and New England would take Membo, because that fills a need. 5, Jacksonville Jaguars. Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State. I would hate this pick for Jacksonville. Hate it. I mean, they're not even close to Super Bowl contention. Like, this is a win-now pick. Like, if any of these teams that are close to winning, picking in the draft, like, if the Cowboys just had, I mean, they did have the year from hell, obviously, but they lost a lot of guys. That's all of a sudden a rebuilding team. I mean, if the Bears feel like they're close, I could see that, but they have a lot of needs on defense. But yeah, I would absolutely hate this pick for Jacksonville. They're just typical Jaguars, going with the win now. They'll go with Trevor Lawrence and all the flashiness they have on offense, but they already have Travis Etienne. And their backup's good too. So that pick would make no sense. Raiders at 6. Teodoro McMillan, the wideout out of Arizona. This would be a good pick. I would like this pick for the Raiders. They need receiver help for Geno Smith, who they traded for. And obviously Pete Carroll's their coach. I mean, Jeanty would make more sense for the Raiders than the Jaguars. Because I think the Raiders, with Geno Smith and Max Crosby, are closer, in theory, to being a playoff team, arguably, than Jacksonville. But the case for Jacksonville is that they're in a weaker division. And the Raiders are in the same division as the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Broncos. But, again, the AFC South sucks. And you can make a case that the AFC West is the best division. But, yeah, McMillan's a good pick. Probably the smart pick, even over Jeanty, if Jeanty was on the board for Vegas. 7, the New York Jets. Shader Sanders, quarterback, Colorado. This pick makes a lot of sense. I mean, the Jets should pick Sanders here if he's on the board. And Justin Fields has proven at both Pittsburgh and Chicago that he's not a franchise quarterback. So Sanders here makes a lot of sense. 8, the Carolina Panthers. Michael Williams, edge rusher, Georgia. Great pick for Carolina. That's a team that I think you can make a case is closer to contending than people realize. Bryce Young showed a lot of flashes. And they need help on the edge, absolutely. They trade away Brian Burns, and they still have Derek Brown. And then they have Shaq Thompson coming back. So, Williams here makes sense. 9, the New Orleans Saints. Mason Graham, defensive line, Michigan. Good pick for New Orleans. It's a need. Saints have a new coach, and really the Saints should be going best player available. I mean, they have a chance to have the worst record in the league next season if, say, the Giants nail their pick, or the Raiders. The Raiders have Geno, so why would I throw them in there? The Browns are better than expected. So, yeah, the Saints, I think, should be going best guy available. So, Graham's not a bad pick. 10, the Chicago Bears. Shamers Stewart, defensive line, edge, Texas A&M. They need to go defense here at this pick, in my opinion. I know a lot of people want them to take Jeanty if he's still on the board, but the Bears need more help on defense. They already have DeAndre Swift. Roschon Johnson. They have a deep running back group. And they need help on defense. So Stewart here makes sense. Very versatile player too. So next time I do a mock draft, I'm going to go in more details about the players because we don't have a lot of time. And I just have to get to other topics. 11, the San Francisco 49ers. Will Campbell, offensive tackle, LSU. Good pick for the Niners. They need a long-term guy at that position because Trent Williams is getting old. 12, Dallas Cowboys, Matthew Golden, wide receiver, Texas. This is the sexy Jerry Jones pick, of course. But to be fair, they do need help at wide receiver to go with CeeDee Lamb. And it's going to be interesting to see where Dallas goes. They have a lot of needs. 13, the Miami Dolphins. Josh Conerly Jr., offensive tackle, Oregon. Good pick for Miami. Conerly's a good prospect. Teron Armstead retired. They need to protect Tua at all costs. 14, the Indianapolis Colts. Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. This is a good pick for Indy. They need more weapons in the passing game to help Anthony Richardson, who I think is going into a make-or-break season next year. 15, the Atlanta Falcons. Jalen Walker, linebacker, edge, Georgia. Good pick for Atlanta. They need help on defense. They have a quarterback that they drafted last year, Michael Penix, and then obviously Kirk Cousins is on the trading block, or he could get cut. So we'll see what happens. 16, the Arizona Cardinals. Derek Harmon, defensive line, Oregon. Arizona needs help defensively for sure. Harmon would be a good pick there. 17, the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike Green, edge, Marshall. A lot of people like this kid, Mike Green. And the Bengals had one of the worst defenses in the league last season, so they need defense at all costs. They need somebody to go with Trey Hendrickson, so that makes sense. Or they trade Hendrickson. So we'll see what happens there. So edge at 17 makes sense. 18, the Seattle Seahawks. Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle, interior offensive line, Texas. So Sam Darnold's in as Geno Smith's out. Is that an upgrade? Maybe. I'm going to say that's a wash for now. Although it could be a drop-off. I think, even though Geno's older. But Sam Darnold just had one great season. This could be the Daniel Jones of this year. Although I said that about Baker Mayfield last year and I was proven wrong. But this year it could be Sam Darnold. So we'll see. But yeah, good pick for Seattle. They need the protection for Darnold. 19, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jahad Campbell, inside linebacker, Alabama. This makes sense for the Bucs. Levante David. We don't know what his long-term future is like. 20, Denver Broncos. Colston Loveland, tight end, Michigan. Broncos could go anywhere. Tight end is an interesting spot. They do need some more weapons in the passing game for Bo Nix. Although they did sign Evan Ingram. Why not have two tight ends? Not the worst thing in the world. New England did it with Gronk and Hernandez in one of the Brady runs. So why not? We've seen it work in the past. 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jackson Dart, quarterback, Ole Miss. Whether they sign Aaron Rodgers or not, this should be the pick if he's available here. Although there's talks about Dart going before Shader now, which is crazy. But I'm going to be very fascinated to see. But yeah, Pittsburgh needs a franchise quarterback. I mean, they struck out with Kenny Pickett. And they went with Wilson last year and Fields. And they were wrong about Fields. And then they said to move on from Wilson because he didn't play well towards the end of the season when they, I think they lost 5 straight games. 22, the Los Angeles Chargers. Kenneth Grant, defensive line, Michigan. Of course, Jim Harbaugh takes a Michigan guy. That's his favorite thing to do. We love seeing him take Michigan guys. But it does make sense. They need run stoppers. 23, the Green Bay Packers. Will Johnson, cornerback, Michigan. I think the Green Bay Packers are a little bit of a wild card in the first round. We don't know what they're going to do. They could go anywhere other than, I mean, they're not going to go quarterback, obviously, but wouldn't be surprised if they went wide receiver. Wouldn't be surprised if they went with the edge rusher. Nothing with Green Bay would surprise me other than quarterback. But cornerback, I think, makes a ton of sense. And Will Johnson had an injury, so he might not go that high. 24, the Minnesota Vikings. Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. Good pick for Minnesota. Good pick. They have a long-term need at that position. Harrison Smith, still on the Vikings, but he's getting old. 25, the Houston Texans. Tyler Booker, interior offensive line, Alabama. The Texans remade their offensive line in the offseason, but it still has work to be done. Booker's a good interior player. That makes sense. 26, Los Angeles Rams. Maxwell Hairston, cornerback out of Kentucky. The Rams are obviously getting younger, getting rid of Cooper Kupp and some other veterans in the past. Hairston makes sense. And they have a need at the position, too. 27, the Baltimore Ravens. Donovan Iziraku, edge, Boston College. Ravens are a team that should go with best player available. They don't really have a lot of needs. 28, Detroit Lions. Donovan Jackson, interior offensive line, Ohio State. This makes sense. Kevin Zeitler left as a free agent. And some of their guys on their offensive line, like Taylor Decker, isn't getting any younger. So Donovan Jackson does make sense. They should bolster their offensive line. 29, the Washington Commanders. James Pierce Jr., edge, Tennessee. The Commanders should go defense. Absolutely. A lot of people think that they should go offense, but they acquired Deebo Samuel. They got Laremy Tunsil, so they should go defense. And I think that this team could compete with the Eagles in that division in 2025. So why not help replace what you lost with the guys you traded? So Chase Young and Montez Sweat. So this pick makes a lot of sense. 30, Buffalo Bills. Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle, Ohio State. This pick also makes sense. Daquan Jones is getting older. And him and Ed Oliver make sense together. 31, the Kansas City Chiefs. Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State. The Chiefs need help on their offensive line. He got exposed in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. And just protect the best player in football at all costs. And then 32, the Philadelphia Eagles. I have them going with Shavon Revel Jr. out of Eastern Carolina. He's a corner. The Eagles lost a few guys in free agency, but they are another team that should go best guy available. They're the best team. I mean, you could argue they're still the best team in football, even though they lost a couple guys in free agency. But this is a good opportunity. Revel and Quinyon Mitchell together in the secondary makes some sense. So there you have it for my first mock draft. Okay, so a couple quick hitters before we go. So we'll start in hockey. The playoffs aren't quite set yet. We're still in the last week of the regular season. The last day is tomorrow, actually, and the playoffs are going to start on Saturday. So, where things stand right now. The East. Toronto has clinched the Atlantic Division. Tampa's second, Florida third. So that looks like that's going to be a round one series. Washington clinched the Metro and best record in the East. or most points in the East. And then second and third is Carolina and New Jersey. So they'll be facing off in round one. Ottawa is locked into the first wild card. Second wild card's undecided. Columbus is still alive. That would be fitting if Columbus got that last playoff spot. I mean, do it for Johnny Gaudreau. Come on. That'd be so special if they got in. They deserve it. And then Montreal. Both of these teams have been surprising this year, and so is Ottawa. So the last wild card will play Washington. Toronto's going to play Ottawa, so you got a Canadian rivalry there. Tampa, Florida. So Florida's done. They played all 82 games, so that they'll be playing Tampa. So that's a good series in the East. And then Carolina, Jersey. We've seen that before. Carolina 1-5 last time. Jersey doesn't have Jack Hughes. We're going to do the picks for the playoff series in hockey on that Saturday show that I want to do. And then, so yeah, I'm interested to see if Columbus gets in or not. And it's crazy that the East was so stacked. Like, Boston and Philly have the least amount of points in the East. And the wild card is going to have either 89 or 90 or 91 points, depending on who gets in. And then, so that's crazy. And then the West. Winnipeg is your President's Trophy winners. Good for them. They got off to that great start this season, didn't look back. And then Dallas second, Colorado third. Those two teams will be playing in round one. That's a good series in the West. Vegas clinched the Pacific Division again. And then LA Edmonton's a series. I think Edmonton's going to be favored in the series over LA. So that's a fun subplot. Oh, wait, the Clippers have their own arena now, so they don't have the three-way like they did in the past. It's just Lakers-Kings. And then Minnesota, St. Louis, we don't know what... oh, wait, they are locked into those last two wildcard spots. So St. Louis will be playing Winnipeg, and Minnesota is going to be playing Vegas. And then Calgary, close, but not it. And then same with the last spot with the East, whoever is going to be out there. So I want to talk about the Rangers for a second. I know people are going to call me a homer. Talking about my favorite hockey team. But what a dismal season for them. 38, 36, and 7. Still over NHL 500 on the year, but probably the most disappointing Rangers season of my lifetime. Way to waste Sam Rosen's last year. But that was cool that TNT let them call that game. Him and his old partner, John Davidson, call that game. And although they lost that game at home. And then... So that's going to be interesting. Does Peter Laviolette lose his job and Chris Drury? I think they should both be out. They should have did that JT Miller trade in the summer, or maybe they'd be in the playoffs, because that's a 6 or an 8 point swing. And the problem for them is they lost so many games in overtime this year. That hurt them. And there's a lot of other games they've blown, including that one, the Ottawa. And then they got blown out by Columbus that one time at home. But yeah, those two are definitely on the chopping block. They're going to make changes to the roster. Mika Zibanejad's probably going to get traded. This might be a rebuild. They might go from President's Trophy to out of the playoffs and you're rebuilding all of a sudden again. Or, they do the let's trade for your distressed asset for our distressed asset kind of thing. What they did back in 2013 when they traded Rick Nash to Columbus in the midst of a disappointing season. They traded Rick Nash to Columbus for Derek Brassard and a lot of other stuff. And then they ended up making the second round of the playoffs that year. They lost to Boston in 5. And then John Tortorella ended up getting fired. But they tried to make the Hail Mary trade with JT Miller. That really didn't work out. I mean, I won't be shocked if JT Miller's on yet another team next year. Because this could be a rebuild. And same for Pittsburgh. And same for the Islanders. And same for Boston. Those 4 teams all missed the playoffs in the East. I won't be shocked if all those teams are rebuilding next year. And that would suck for the 2 New York teams because they have 2 star goalies, Igor Shesterkin and Ilya Sorokin. And then, Shesterkin's had a disappointing year in my mind, too. I feel like that's probably one of the biggest reasons why they went from where they were to last year to where they are this year. But they also have the best chance to reestablish themselves as a contender. Because remember a couple years ago, Vegas missed the playoffs completely, and the next year they were Stanley Cup champions. So, could happen. I've seen it happen before. And they changed their coach, too. They went from Peter DeBoer to Bruce Cassidy. So I've seen teams in hockey do it before. I think that's best case scenario for the Rangers. If it's kind of like Vegas a couple years ago, where Vegas had a disastrous season, missed the playoffs, changed the coach, and the next year they won the Stanley Cup. I mean, that could happen with the Rangers with a couple of trades. And obviously Vegas changed up the roster a little bit too that summer, if I'm not mistaken. And then the West, Vancouver obviously disappointing. They traded JT Miller. St. Louis, big surprise, making the playoffs as a wild card. Their coach has done an outstanding job this year. Did they make an in-season change? Yes. Jim Montgomery got hired on November 24th. That's right, they fired Drew Bannister. And then they brought in Jim Montgomery. And then now they're in the playoffs and they're going to be playing Winnipeg. And then Kraken had a disappointing season. Anaheim, I remember, got off to that good start. They fell apart. But the biggest disappointment in the West was definitely Nashville. They put all those pieces together and they were a big fat flop. They were more of a flop than the Rangers, and it wasn't even close. Because I thought Nashville was a Stanley Cup contender coming in the year. I think I picked them to win the Cup, if I'm not mistaken. I think I picked them over Florida. And then, or maybe I picked the Rangers, who the hell knows. I have to look back at my preseason picks. But I thought I had Nashville at least in the final. And then Barry Trotz just was living in the past and thinking big money was going to, or big spending money was going to put you at the top, but it didn't. It was a complete flop. To me, they're easily the biggest disappointment this year. Steven Stamkos was brought in, and they brought in a lot of other people, and it just went bad. Oh, yeah, I think Ryan O'Reilly was also brought in. Yeah, Brady Shea, 7-year deal free agency. Steven Stamkos, 4-year deal. And Jonathan Marchessault. Yeah, they really went big name shopping and it didn't work. And now they're in the lottery. So I'm interested to see what happens with them. I think that Andrew Burnett's job's he's going to get fired too. He should. They were so disappointing this year. And Barry Trotz will keep his job because he's Barry Trotz. And yeah, they were more disappointing than the Rangers, in my opinion. It wasn't even close. And I don't think anybody had St. Louis ahead of them before the year. And they had 66 points in Nashville. That's absurd. what a freaking flop that was, the Predators. And then before we go, Rory McIlroy won the Masters. Congratulations to him. Long time coming for Rory. It felt like he was going to choke, but he came through. And then coming in second was Justin Rose in the playoff. He was great. And then Paul Reed, Scotty Scheffler, and tied for fifth was Bryson DeChambeau, who tied Rory at one point, and Sungjae Im. So, great Masters. Congrats to Rory. Well-deserved. RBC Heritage is coming up. And he is rightfully not going to play in the RBC Heritage this weekend. And then baseball, quick gloss at the standings before we go. Couple finals for you. Cards over the Astros 4-1. Brewers over the Tigers 5-1. Jays over the Braves 3-1. Mets and Twins tied in the ninth inning right now. Cubs Padres coming up at 4 as we record. All right, AL East, the Yankees are in front. They've been the best team in that division so far. Plus 23 run differential. Pitching hasn't really been that great for the Yankees, but they're scoring a lot of runs. They lead the American League in runs scored. And then the Guardians and the Tigers are tied for first in the Central. I think the Tigers have been better so far than the Guardians. And in Texas is in first in the West at 10-7. All those teams have negative run differentials. So the National League's been much better than the American League to start the year. I think the Yankees have been above everybody else in the American League so far. But a lot of people say, like, oh, well, that's because of those couple games against the Brewers when it was hot. Well, that could be true. But I feel like they've stood out the most. And Detroit has stood out to me too. And then Texas has a minus 15 run differential. And Tampa's been better than expected despite being 8-9. And they have a good run differential. They've adjusted to the boss accordingly. And then the White Sox are obviously abysmal. They're 4-12. They haven't won a game on the road yet. But hey, their run differential is only minus 12. KC, Minnesota, Texas, and Oakland all have worse run differentials than the White Sox. But the White Sox pitching's been very good. That's why the run differential is what it is. And even Oakland at 7-10 hasn't been a disaster. Baltimore's 6-10. But they're only 3.5 back of the Yankees. National League, the Mets are 11-6, so they're a game better than the Yankees. But their offense hasn't been as good as the Yankees, but their pitching's been better than the Yankees is. And they have a good run differential, plus 21. So, the Phillies are right behind them at 10-7. They only have a plus 3 run differential. Atlanta's been disappointing. They're 5-12. Miami, 8-8. Not bad. They're minus 12, though, so they're really not that good. Chicago Cubs have stood out. They're 12-8, but the caveat here is that they had those 2 games against the Dodgers, but they lost both of those games. They had the best run differential so far, and they have scored the most runs, but their pitching has stunk. So they're kind of like the National League's version of the Yankees in a way. The Reds have been pretty impressive, in my opinion. They're 9-8, though. Milwaukee's 10-9, but they're minus 2 run differential. But the reason they're minus 2 is because they got blown out by the Yankees twice, or else they would have been positive. And then St. Louis is 9-9, plus 10. So the Cardinals haven't been that bad either. And then Pittsburgh's been disappointing, 6-12. So much for thinking St. Louis was going to finish in last. Oh, that's so far. They have a poor run differential, minus 24. So the worst team has easily been the Rockies. They're 3-14, minus 50 run differential. How about this? The Padres are in first. They're 14-4. They've been the most impressive team so far. Plus 35 run differential. Their pitching's been outstanding. San Francisco's been really good. They're 12-5. Dodgers are 13-6, but they have played more than everybody else because they had those 2 games in Japan, but those were both wins. So if they didn't play those Japan games, they'd be in third. But that's been the best division, hands down. But the Rockies might be this year's White Sox. That's my early overreaction. Arizona, I like the Diamondbacks. They're good. They're 10-7. But the NOS is the best division so far. Now just looking at the standings. All right, so there you have it for the podcast. It was a long one. I'm going to come back tomorrow. We'll do hockey series predictions. Then we'll officially make picks for the 1/8 in the NBA. So have a great day, everyone.